So I've been building out a number of search forms in our legacy AngularJS platform at Envision. And as I've been doing this, the search forms typically have some sort of set of filters. So you can see we have a status filter, a user filter, and pagination, which I would consider a facet of the filtering. And what I've been settling on is a pattern in which these filter options are actually href values. So if we zoom in to one of these elements, what we can see here is that it's an actual href that includes the filtering for the form that would result after clicking on a particular button. And what we can see is that when we click into this, it's hard to see the URL here, but you can see we have search keywords, search status, search user ID, and search page. And we just clicked on the archive status. You can see we have archived here. And now that we have archived here, all of these other filters, when clicked, will honor the archive status, but will also change their own filter. So if I click over to 5, you can see that we have maintained search status archive. We have switched over to page 5. And in fact, again, if we look in the URL, we can see here's 5 and here's archived. Now, the benefits of driving the search state into the URL and using the URL as the source of truth for our search is that we unlock a number of native behaviors of the browser. The most prominent of which is that we can now use the back button to iterate through our previous searches, and of course we can use the forward button to move forward through our subsequent searches. We also allow the user to, say, right click on a particular filter and open that up in a new tab. So right now we're not filtering on any user, but if I were to right click on Arnold and open in a new tab and click through to the new tab, you'll see that the new tab now has Arnold plus the previously selected status here of archived. And of course, we've reset the pagination to 1 because this is a new fresh search. And let's close this again. Let's go back to our other one. The other option that we enable is the fact that the URL can now be copy and pasted to another user. So for example, I could say, let's look for test for active things that were authored by Hannah, and page 5. Now I can take this URL, we can open up another frame, paste that in, and here we immediately have test active Hannah, page 5. So what we're trying to do here is work with or in conjunction with the natural mechanics of the browser and not work against them by, say, implementing all of these filters using a series of click event handlers. So how do we do this? Let's take a look at the Angular code. So the idea, let me try to figure out how to best explain all of this. The idea here is we have a set of filters that are driving our search, but the filters are not the source of truth. The URL is the source of truth. So if we jump down to our init function, what you can see is that we set up a location change success handler, and this is going to be triggered anytime the location changes fully. And if we jump down to that, what you'll see is we grab the state out of the URL with some sane defaults. Then we check the URL state against our local view model state. And if any of those are divergent, we take the URL state, we drive it into the view model state, and then we reload the data. Now, when we load the remote data, let's jump down to that. That's where we're getting our console logging, which is what we were seeing here on the side, right? So if I now click into Ben, you can see that we have user 1. If I click into Kim, you can see we have user 2. So this is that load remote data function. Now, anytime we have the load remote data, we then call these set methods to set the search status links, the user links, and the page links. And those are the options that we have here in the status, the user, and the pagination. So every time the URL changes, we have to rebuild these link options because they're being driven by href values. So let's take a look at the status links. So if we jump down to that, you'll see that we have our two options, active and archived. And to generate the links, we're going to map those values onto a set of objects, each of which has this href. Now, href here is going to build a URL that includes the current view model for all of the other search filters, but allows us to override a subset of those filters. In this case, we're going to override the search status because we're building the search status links. And anytime the user changes the status, we want to reset the search to be page 1. So we want to override page 1 of the search results. And if we look at this href for filters, it's actually just building a URL that prefix with a hash because I'm using the hash mode, not the HTML5 mode. And you can see what this does is it allows you to build a URL for the current filters given a set of overrides. And this will ultimately generate a URL that encodes all of the filters into the resultant value, but again, allows us to override individual settings. So in this case, we were going to override the search status and the page. So if we pass in an override for search status, we're going to use the overrides value, but you'll see that we're going to use the scope.filters value for everything else. So ultimately, what that allows us to do, if we jump up to the HTML of this demo and we look at the actual links for the status, all we have to do is loop over those search status links and bind to that value with the ng href. And then every time our filter changes, these href values are going to be recalculated and reconciled with the view model. So in fact, if we look at, let's just drive into a particular pagination link. And if we keep focused on this href value here, what you can see is that as I click through other values, this href is changing to update. So right now you can see we have search keywords test. So even as I change the user here, you can see the test is maintained. But then if we go to Blammo, you can see that now the pagination link for the keywords here, Blammo has been interpolated into the resultant href, which allows us then to click on for, which maintains Blammo, which maintains active, which maintains Kim, and so on and so forth. And again, because this is all URL based, I can just back button to get back to where we were before. I can forward button to get back to where we are now. So I think driving the state into the URL really unlocks a very natural and intuitive user experience. And it does require a little bit more footwork in terms of building all of these URLs based on overrides. But the nice thing here is that all of these are essentially idempotent, meaning I can safely call them as many times as I want. So all I have to do is call set search status links, set search user links, and set search page links anytime a view model changes in such a way that any of the filters need to be regenerated. Easy peasy, nothing much to it, just a little bit more elbow grease than you might have if you were using just some ng click handlers that dynamically changed the URL or dynamically changed the view model. So anyway, this is just a pattern that I've been using lately and I've been really enjoying it. And I thought it might be interesting to people, worth sharing.